Welcome back to University English 2, The Skills, and we are on the penultimate unit, 12, Talking the Talk. Otherwise, this could be called Performing Well in Interviews. We're going to start with an introduction, followed by preparation for an interview, and then we will look at the different types of interview which we may encounter. This will be followed by the different types of questions which you can be asked at interview, and then the strategy which we can employ for answering these questions at interview, in particular the STAR strategy for our supporting arguments for our answers. We'll then look at examples of questions and answers for different categories of interview question, starting with introductory questions, and then knowledge questions, credentials questions, opinion questions, behaviour questions, ability questions, suitability questions, analytical questions, nonsense questions, invitation questions. And then we'll look at what you should do after the interview itself, followed by a summary. Arthur Ashe and Arnold Rampersad in Days of Grace, a memoir published in 1994, said, "One important key to success is self-confidence. An important key to self-confidence is preparation." Bear in mind that the purpose of resumes and CVs is to get you an interview with a prospective employer. The purpose of the interview itself is to get you an offer for the job. Also bear in mind that there is often fierce competition for vacancies, with hundreds or thousands of people applying for a single position. Possessing good interview skills is not only important for securing employment, though. Interviews are often used for admissions to other institutions, to schools, to colleges, and universities as well. Now, the interview may well be a form of further testing of ability, but often it's about whether the potential employer or recruiter likes the candidate and thinks that their personality and their skill set are right for that particular job. So it's a lot about whether the people who are interviewing you like you and whether they think you're suitable for this job. Now, before any interview, you want to start with preparation. You should be preparing for interviews. And one of the places you should start your preparation is research. Research the company itself and research the job as much as is possible. Also, make plans for how you are going to physically get to the company if it's an in-person interview. You want to make sure that you are 10 to 15 minutes early. Better early than late. The expression better late than never does not apply here, because if you are late for an interview, you can rest assured that you will likely not get the job. Practice any interview questions that you might get in light of your research. So you need to consider what type of questions they might be asking you, and you need to be practicing how you would answer those particular questions. And that's a lot of what this particular presentation is about, is how you can answer these questions. Now, on the day of the interview itself, if it's a physical interview, bring your resume or CV. They've already seen it, but bring it anyway, just in case they haven't printed it out. And also make sure that you dress in appropriate clothing. What is appropriate clothing? Well, for men, wear a dark suit with a light shirt, for example, light blue or white. A simple tie, not one that shows any political leanings, with dress shoes. That means very nice shoes should be worn as well. Now, your belt and shoes traditionally should be the same color. And make sure your shoes are nicely polished also. Your hair should be well groomed and it should be neat. And for jewelry, only wear watches or, if you're married, a wedding ring, perhaps. Don't go in there with all different kinds of piercings. Let's take a look at some examples. So in this picture here, you can see that this person is not going to be getting a job. The suit, though it doesn't look so bad, is not really dark. Wearing that kind of leather jacket is inappropriate. A baseball cap is inappropriate. There's no tie either. It's not a very good first impression. Here we have an example where somebody is wearing what we call a blazer. It looks okay. It's maybe smart casual. Sunglasses should definitely not be worn at interview. His hair is well groomed and neat. However, there's no tie or shirt that can be seen there, and jeans are definitely not appropriate. Now, this would be pretty good as long as he took off the sunglasses for the interview. He looks well groomed. He's got a nice watch on there, nothing more in terms of jewelry. The tie is simple. We've got a dark suit and a white shirt. Everything seems to match. It looks very professional. And here you can see this is also very professional. We can see some nice dress shoes there. Also, you can see they're very well polished. I presume the belt is going to be the same color as those shoes too. For women, you want to wear a suit or perhaps a dress. If you haven't got those, then perhaps clothing with matching colors on the top and the bottom. Skirts should be knee length or longer. And only simple jewelry should be worn. Makeup should be light and maybe just a hint of perfume. Remember, you're not going out on a date, you're going to an interview. So this would be inappropriate. It's too short and too revealing, and it doesn't look very professional. Here as well, we've got jeans and a cardigan type top. She looks very nice, undoubtedly. The hair is very, very well groomed as well. However, this is not, once again, appropriate for an interview. This is more like what is appropriate for an interview. This is a suit, and you can see she looks very professional, white shirt. She has a bare minimum of jewelry, just some earrings there, light makeup. She looks very, very professional. And here again, very professional look, which would undoubtedly put the interviewers in the frame of mind that this is really a professional person that we are dealing with. Let's take a look then at the types of interview themselves. And there are many names associated with different types of interview. For example, it might be a remote interview, and these would be conducted on the telephone or maybe via a computer application like Zoom, for example. Now, often these kind of interviews are preliminary interviews, maybe a first interview, which we'll look at in a moment. However, if the distance is very long, if this job is in another country, for example, this could actually be the interview itself. Another way of describing an interview would be a first interview. These are often the initial interviews which are designed to reduce the number of candidates who are applying for the job so that only the best prospects are left for a second or third interview. So let's look at a second interview next. Now, this would be an interview after the first, and it would be designed to select who would be given the offer of employment. But note that sometimes you might be faced with third interviews or fourth interviews even. So there might be a whole number of interviews that take place before the selection of the candidate or candidates who are going to be given the offer. Another way of describing an interview is a face-to-face interview. And this would be a direct meeting of the candidate and the recruiter, the person who's going to be hiring you or making the decision to hire you. And face-to-face interviews are the most usual type of interview. Next, an interview might be described as a panel interview. And this would be where there are a number of people who are sitting on a panel. Usually one of them will be a senior decision maker. And some of the people might ask you questions and some of them might not, or they might all engage in questioning. There might also be a group interview. And this is where several candidates will be asked to discuss something in a group or perform some kind of task. They might be asked to do something all together. Now, these are designed to test leadership, innovation, and problem-solving ability with a view to selecting those who perform the best in this group. You might also have a sequential interview. And this is where there will be several interviews in a series, usually on the same date, with different interviewers who would ask questions about different areas. So you will go from one interview to the next interview to the next interview, a sequential interview. There might also be a social interview, and this will be where interviews are conducted over a meal, perhaps, such as lunch or dinner. And these are to test not only to interview you, but to test your interpersonal and social skills as well, in addition to using that as an opportunity to ask you interview questions. Let's move on then from the type of interview to the type of interview question which you might be asked. Now, there are many potential interview questions, but all of these can be categorized into 10 main types of question. So let's take a look. The first would be an introductory question. Now, often this is the first question which is asked, and it's a very open question, essentially asking you to introduce yourself. An example might be simply, tell me about yourself. Next, we have credentials questions. Now, these are questions which are asked to verify that your stated background is true. In other words, to check if you are lying or not in your resume or CV. So an example might be, you state on your resume that you are active in many clubs. Can you tell me which ones? The next type would be knowledge questions. And these are questions which are aimed at verifying your level of expertise and knowledge, or that level of expertise and knowledge which you claim that you have. For example, you took a product design course. What are the most important things for product design? Now, the next kind of question would be opinion questions. Now, these questions explore your values and your views, and in particular, they're seeking to know whether these are well-reasoned, well-thought-out opinions and well-thought-out values. An example here might be, what is your greatest weakness? Or, who do you admire the most? The next category of questions would be behaviour questions. And these questions aim to test how you would likely respond in certain situations, in particular, stressful situations. An example here might be, what would you do if there was a fire in the building? Next, we have ability questions. And these questions are aimed at testing your abstract skills. For example, you state here you're a problem solver. Can you give me a real-world example of this? Next, we have suitability questions. And these questions are trying to determine if you are the right fit for that particular job. For example, why should we hire you? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? Another type of question would be an analytical question. And these are often used in fields where mathematics features highly. These questions test your ability to quickly analyze and to quickly think on your feet. So an example might be, how many sheep do you think there are in this country? Another category, and one of the most feared, are nonsense questions. Now, these questions are aimed at determining if you can think outside the box. In other words, to determine if you have any real-world creativity or creative thought. For example, if you were a smartphone, which one would you be? And finally, we have invitation questions. And these questions invite you to ask questions. So they are simply asking if you have any questions that you want to ask about the company or the job. And they usually feature at the end of an interview. Now, these help to indicate your real level of enthusiasm for the job. Have you thought about the job itself? And what kind of questions do you have about this job? Now, how do we go about answering these questions at interview? Now, there are essential things that you should do in an interview when you're answering the questions. And the first is aim for your answers to be detailed. That means at least 30 seconds in length. Don't just give one word or one sentence answers, and preferably about a minute or so in length. You don't want to talk their heads off. You don't want to talk for 10 minutes in answer to a question, but it should not be a short answer. Also, speak confidently. Remember, your voice is important. Your body language is important. So speak confidently using good vocal variety. Positive body language, that means hold eye contact with the interviewers, smile and relax. Now, obviously, don't do the opposite of any of these things, but in particular, don't answer a question with, I don't know, or a similar kind of response. Also, don't allow long silences. If you need a bit of time to think, don't make it silent thought. Instead, you can say slowly something like, that's an interesting question, or, let me think about that for a moment, or something similar in order to buy you time. Don't just have a long silence. Now, when answering interview questions, if you're having trouble deciding how to structure your answers, then structure them in the same way as you would a written body paragraph. The only difference being you're going to speak it instead. So you'll start with your topic sentence, and the topic itself will be clearly indicated in the question that they are asking you. And then you will indicate your thoughts about that particular topic, and these thoughts are therefore your main idea. support the main idea with supporting sentences. And here you would be giving details to support it, explanations, or examples. And examples are one of the most common way that you will support these assertions about yourself, these claims about your abilities, and so on. Now end with a simple concluding sentence by paraphrasing, which once again means saying again using different words your topic sentence. Then the interviewer will clearly know that you are finished. So that's why this is a good structure, because your view on the topic asked will be immediately clear to the interviewer, and then you will be guided to speak about that topic and not to waffle or talk about other irrelevant things. And then finally, as mentioned, the interviewer will know that you're finished after you have paraphrased your topic sentence. Now, often we will use real experiences to provide these supporting arguments to support our main idea here. And the STAR approach is a good strategy to use when you are giving these real-world experiences, these examples, in order to support your arguments. So STAR stands for situation. So here you can start by describing the background and then what led to that particular event taking place. And then the task. Describe your involvement in the event. What was your particular role? And then action. Describe how you acted and why you chose to act in that particular way. And then finally, the R is for result. Describe the results of your actions and how this has affected your mindset. What have you learned from this particular experience? All of this being an example of a real-world experience which will support your topic sentence, your topic and your main idea. Let's take a look at how this would all come together in particular interview questions and particular interview categories, starting with the introductory question. Once again, this is often the first question which is asked at interview, and it's really a very open invitation for you to introduce yourself to the interviewer. Now, this is a fantastic opportunity because it's such an open question. It's an opportunity for you to present the best aspects of yourself. So it will be very similar to an optional profile section in your resume or CV, except that you're speaking it. It's a verbal profile. One of the mistakes made here by a lot of interviewees is for them to talk about their family, how many members there are in their family, where they were born, their hometown, their favorite football team, and other irrelevant topics. They want to know about you. How would you define yourself, particularly in terms of how you would define yourself in relation to the job? So let's take a look at an example. The interviewer asks, "Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?" To which the interviewee answers, "Sure. Through and through, I'm an expressionist artist. Even when I was young, I was always interested in expressing myself through art. When I had something to say to someone, I would often simply draw a picture, and this would be how I said, what I felt, or how I thought. Of course, I can communicate in other ways, but I think over time, my best method of communicating ideas has become through my artistic works." So let's take a look at the structure here. We have the subject, in this case, the topic is I, and often the topic will be I, unless the question is about a particular topic. So here the topic is I, and the main idea is that I'm an expressionist artist. The interviewee then goes on to support that idea by way of talking about an example or examples, in this case, of when she was young and how she would express herself by drawing pictures when she felt a certain way or drawing pictures to show what she or he thought. And then we end with a concluding sentence. Of course, I can communicate in other ways, but, and then we have a paraphrased topic sentence, my best method of communicating ideas has become through my artistic works. And then the interviewer will know I'm finished. Now, it's not very short. It's not very long either. Not talking about family, not talking about friends, hobbies, pastimes. No, we're just defining ourselves as an expressionist artist, supporting that idea, and then concluding at the end. It's very coherent and very relevant for the job that's being applied for. Let's have a look then at credentials questions. Now, these are, again, asking if you're telling the truth in your resume or CV. Now, in order to sound like you're telling the truth, you need to make sure that you know what is in your resume and CV. So make sure you remember what you've written in there and be prepared to give more details about the things that are contained in your CV or your resume, because this is how they're going to verify that this is in fact the truth. So here the interviewer asks, in your resume, you say you have good German skills. Can you tell us more about how you got those skills? To which the interviewee answers, well, I have been studying German in my free time for many years and consider myself to be quite fluent now. I started studying it in high school and I developed a liking for it. So I continued trying to improve even after my classes had ended. Last year, I traveled to Germany and went to the cities of Hamburg, Munich, and Berlin. I spoke only German and made a real effort to meet native German speakers. It was a fantastic experience, and I think it helped me to improve my German skills even more. So I consider myself to be quite fluent in the language as a result of my love of it. Okay, so the question itself is clearly pointing to the resume and asking about the German skills. And can you tell us more about how you got those skills? Is really testing, do you have these German skills in reality? The interviewee knows this straight away. So the topic is German skills. And the main idea is that I'm very fluent in German. That idea is supported by way of examples. So examples are the most common way of supporting an interview, talking about the fact that he or she studied it in high school and then went on to improve it even after classes had finished, how the candidate went to Germany, traveled to different cities, spoke German with people there. And then the concluding sentence is a restatement. Again, we're paraphrasing the topic sentence. I am quite fluent in the language now. Let's move on to knowledge questions. Now, these are questions designed to see if you have the knowledge that you're supposed to have as a result of your studies or your work experience. And often the questions that will be asked will be in relation to knowledge which is important for that particular job. So before you come to interview, study up a bit on the things that you should know as a result of your studies or work experience. As an example here, the interviewer asks, I know it sounds like a simple question, but can you tell me the key aspects of design and which you consider the most important? To which the interviewee answers, of course, the key aspects are line, shape, tone, color, texture, form, scale, space, and light. The goal of all of these aspects is to bring the person viewing the art into the art itself. I think the most important one of these is form. This is because form is, in a way, a combination of all the other elements. In order to have good form, you need a good application of line, shape, tone, color, texture, scale, space, and light. So yeah, for me, form is the most important element. Okay, so the interviewer is asking what all designers should know. What are the aspects of design? To which the interviewee will state immediately what those aspects are. And then to further demonstrate his or her knowledge of this particular area, they go on to talk about the form and why this is important to them as the most important of these particular aspects, ending with a concluding sentence with a final thought saying, yeah, I think form is the most important for these reasons. For opinion questions, and these are questions which are designed to test really if you have thought about your opinions and you have good reasoned opinions. So in order to answer these questions, you need to have opinions, reasoned opinions which were formed objectively rather than subjectively. And in order for this to take place, you do need to self-reflect. You need to do a little bit of thinking. Think about what your weaknesses are. Think about what your strengths are. Think about who you admire and why you admire them. And think about what your worldviews, your opinions on various different topics of importance are. And again, why do you have those views? Are they reasoned views or not? So you have to be a bit of a thinker in order to answer these questions well. So objectivity is an important word here. Objectively, consider why you have these views and be able to prove their validity to yourself so that you can have supporting arguments for your interviewers. Let's take a look at an example. So here the question is, what do you consider your strengths and weaknesses to be? And the interviewee answers. That's a tough question. I think my big weakness and strength come from a similar place. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I can spend and do spend a lot of time on my work, adjusting it and trying to make it as perfect as possible. While this is clearly good because my work is always of the highest quality, it can impact my ability to produce more works. I am aware of this issue and have been trying to meet deadlines as required, with perhaps, to my standards at least, less than absolutely perfect works. So yes, perfectionism can be a good and bad thing. So obviously, if the interviewee had not thought about the strengths and weaknesses of their own personality before the interview, this would have been a very difficult question to answer. But the interviewee, he has already thought about these things and knows himself or herself quite well. And in this case, we can clearly see that being a perfectionist can be good because you can produce really good work, really good stuff, but it can be bad because it can take a long time to perfect everything. So that is clearly expressed, it's explained here well in support of the argument. And then we end with a concluding sentence once again, which is simply a paraphrase of the main idea, that being, I'm a perfectionist and this is my weakness and my strength. Next, we have behaviour questions. Now, these kind of questions are aimed at seeing how you would respond in certain situations, and in particular, stressful situations, because people actually often show their true colours when they are under stress. And often the questions will be stress tests which are relevant in particular to the position or the job. Now, be sure to explain well how you would react and, if possible, give examples of how you did react in a similar situation in the past. So examples, again, are one of the most common ways you support your arguments. So the question here is, what would you do if the fire alarm went off in the building? To which the candidate answers, I think the most important thing is to stay calm. I would see if there is any visible smoke or the smell of it. If so, I would move away from that area and head down the fire escapes in the opposite direction. If I was with others, I think I would speak up with my observations and maybe yell, "Keep calm, let's move slowly this way." Of course, many fire alarms are tests or false alarms, but still I would do the same thing, move towards the nearest exit. So staying calm and keeping others calm is key. Otherwise, there might be a stampede and more people would die. Okay, so this is it's a question which has been recognized by the interviewee as being a stress test question, a behavior question. And straight away, we have the main idea being stay calm. That is supported with an unreal example. So a lot of this is using unreal conditional forms, but it's an unreal example of an imaginary situation and how the interviewee would react in that particular situation. Once again, we have a concluding sentence which indicates or paraphrases the topic sentence, simply saying, staying calm is the key, otherwise people can die. Next, we have ability questions. Now, these are designed to test your ability in skills that are sometimes unquantifiable in other ways. So if you state that you are good about it, then you need to prove it. And again, proving it is often done with real world examples. So the interviewer here asks, you state in your resume that you have good interpersonal skills. Can you explain more about that? To which the interviewee answers, yes, I've always been an outgoing person since I can remember. But more importantly, I have come to understand that I am an optimist. When I was in school, I had a large group of friends, and this continued into university. I think it is because I never judge people too harshly. We all have our own problems and issues to deal with, and I try to talk with people about their problems when they want to, and I think more importantly, I try to encourage them to look on the bright side of things. So I think if someone brings positive feelings and thoughts into other people's lives, I think they just like being around that person. Okay, so here the topic is interpersonal skills, and the main idea that the interviewee is giving is that she's an outgoing person, and that's why she has good interpersonal skills, but also that the reason that people like her or him is because they are an optimist. Support it with examples here, talking about her group of friends when she was in school and university, and then an explanation as well of why she thinks being an optimist makes her actually, or him, a good person to be around. Suitability questions. Now, this means, are you right for the job? In which case you want to know as much as possible about the job. So do some research about the job as much as possible. Consider why you would like this job and think about what both you and the employer are looking for in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term. Here the question is, what are your career goals? To which the interviewee answers, well, I have pretty clear goals. I would like to work with your firm for the entirety of my career and eventually become a senior executive within the firm. I know it sounds a little ambitious, but I have been eyeing this company for a few years now, and it represents everything I am interested in: creativity, hard work, excellence. So I think I cannot find a better match, and I hope I get a chance to prove that I am the perfect match for you. So you can see here that the interviewer is testing what the applicant's actual goals are, and they want to see if they're suitable for the job. Now, if the interviewer is looking for somebody just for a couple of months, then this would not be the right answer. So some research into what the interviewer is likely to be seeking from a candidate would be good. And the interviewee has seen that the candidate wants somebody who's committed to the company and is showing in the answer that commitment, saying they want to stay with this company long term. They want to become a senior executive within the company. They've been looking at the company and expressing their interest in the company for a long time. They flatter the interviewer as well by saying how wonderful the company is, but with its creativity, hard work, and excellence, and try to show that they are the right match. They are suitable for this job. Next, let's look at analytical questions. Now, these questions, which often involve mathematics of some kind, are not necessarily meant to be answered accurately, though an accurate answer would be beneficial too. But instead, it's more about the reasoning process, how you got to that particular answer. And it's the reasoning process which is actually being examined. So be sure then to explain your thought processes very well. So here, for example, the interviewer asks, how many pencils are there in the world? To which the interviewee answers, that's a very strange question. Let me think about that for a moment. I would say there are maybe 70 billion pencils in the world. This is obviously a guess, but there are about 7 billion people in the world, and I think everyone has a few pencils around, but the young more and the old less. In poorer countries less, and in richer ones more. So maybe on average, as an estimate, there are around 10 pencils for each person. So 70 billion pencils. Okay, so are there 70 billion pencils in the world? Well, I don't know because I haven't actually checked, but that's not really important. What is important is how the person got to the result of 70 billion. Is it a logical process that they have followed? So it seems so. An explanation is warranted, so it's given here. So 7 billion people. Let's say the young have more, the old have less, the poor more, the rich less. Maybe on average, then you've got 10 per person. And that's how I come to the conclusion of 70 billion pencils. So the process is more important than the answer. Next, let's look at nonsense questions. Now, these are some of the most feared questions. They are designed to test your creativity, your imagination, and your fast thinking ability, your ability to think on your feet. In the example, the interviewer asks, if you could own one thing, what would you choose to own? To which the interviewee answers, that's an easy question. I would own a literal ton of gold. This is because gold always has value. And value is like a sun with its massive gravity. Value shows success of some kind. And like a positive attitude is attractive, so a positive bank balance is attractive. For example, your company has value because of its worth. People like me want to work here. And your interest in me is so that I can give you value. So if I choose to have something, it would be value. So notice the answer is well reasoned, well explained, with logical thought. So a clear explanation here of why the person wishes to own that particular thing. Now, often the final question will be to invite questions from you. Often it won't even be a question, it will simply be a statement. Now make sure that you have some sensible questions about the position which are already prepared. Don't ask about salary, how much money you're going to get, holidays, how many days off am I going to have, or other kinds of benefits, unless they are brought up by the interviewer, or it is very clear at this point that they've already decided that they are going to hire you. So in the example, we're done. Do you have anything you want to ask us? To which the interviewee answers, actually, I know you have a few entry-level positions available, and I was wondering which one you would be considering me for. So you can see that actually it's a very reasoned question. The candidate is expressing his or her interest in the job and in seriously taking the job, and wants to know which department or which part of the company he or she is going to be working for if they do give her an offer. The interviewee answers, or the interviewer answers, there are several teams. Do you have a preference? Yes, I would prefer to start, and I mean start and not end, in the publications team. This is because I think I can learn the most at the moment from seeing the requirements for the end products, and this will help me tailor design skills to those needs. So, and you can see now that this has become a very reasoned discussion now between the two. So we have we have lots of teams. Do you want to take any particular role? To which the interviewee will answer that yes, I've already thought about it, and this is the team that I want to actually work in. So already the interviewer will have in mind that this candidate actually already knows which team he or she wishes to enter into, and will already be thinking about him or her in the prospect of having that particular job. Now understand that the interview is not over after you've actually left the room. You are still being assessed. That means they're still thinking about whether or not they're going to hire you for this particular job. So it's always worth reminding the interviewers of your existence, because they will have interviewed likely several people and be thinking about other people as well. So remind them about you. And you can do this rather easily by sending a thank you email the next day to the interviewer or the interviewers. Now, this would be a professional email, so make sure it looks as such. We've got the to line, and then in the subject line, interview, illustrated design artist reference number. And then dear, for the salutation, dear Mr. Sung-Hun Park, I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview for the position. It was a real pleasure to meet you. I hope to be hearing from you soon. Regards, Gordon Lee. And this will make Mr. Sung-Hun Park remember Gordon Lee and remind him about all of the good qualities he thought in the interview, adding to the fact that she's clearly very professional, having sent such a professional email. Let's summarize. Research the company and the position and consider what kind of person the company is actually looking for. This will set you up in a good light to be able to prepare for the questions that you're likely to encounter. Make sure that you dress appropriately for the interview, and also turn up a few minutes early. You don't want to be late. Be familiar with the different types of interview that you can possibly encounter, and also be familiar with the different types of interview questions that you can find. take a long, hard look at your own resume and curriculum vitae. Think about what questions you would have if this were another person's resume or CV. Do a lot of practice. Practice answering different interview questions. You might have questions about your own resume or CV. Once you have tried to think of it as if you were another person, you might have questions which are aimed at determining if you have the skills that you claim, if you have the abilities that you claim, if you have the knowledge that you should have if you studied in particular areas. And also you might have some other questions that you can practice, perhaps behavior questions, or even practice a few analytical and nonsense questions as well. Now, for the structure of your answers, if you're having difficulty structuring them, think of the structure in terms of an academic paragraph. That is, you've got your topic, it's usually in the question, and then what do you think about that topic? What is your main idea? Support it well with your supporting arguments, and then throw in a concluding sentence with a final thought at the end, or just paraphrase your topic sentence. Now, always the support is important here. You want to prove that your claims are true. If you are saying that you are a good communicator, prove it. What are you going to give by way of explanation, or more usually, example from your own personal story, a real example from your life? How are you going to prove that these claims are true? And you should be testing yourself a lot with questions that you might ask yourself. Now, when you're looking to structure these stories about yourself that you're using in support, you can use the STAR model, which would be describe the basic situation and your role in that situation, your task, what actions you took, and the result. And this story as a whole should then go to supporting your claim, whatever your claim was. Understand that after the interview isn't over. You do want to perhaps send a thank you email for the interviewer or interviewer's time at the end to let them think about you once more. And that concludes today's presentation on preparation for an interview. And this is also the last lecture in the series. So I hope that you have enjoyed University English 2, the skills, and I wish you all the success in your life.